Good morning. I'm Leora. I'm the administrator. And Scott has written a skit for Eric and I. It's called Walkie-Talkies. Here's mine. Take one. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Are you there?
Hello. Yes, I'm here.
Did you say hello?
I did.
Oh, you did. Hello?
Hello, I'm here.
You're weird?
No, you're weird. I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, great. You're here. Wait, you're here? No, you're not.
No. I'm here. You're there.
Oh, that makes more sense. Who is
Who
this?
is this?
It's me.
I know it's free. They're walkie-talkies. Who is this?
Me.
Oh, you. Great. So good to hear from you. What's up?
Lights. Why? What's up there?
Nothing. Did you say lights?
I did. Did you say nothing?
I did.
Nothing. Like a large empty void above you? Just hanging above you? So why did you call?
You called.
I called.
Right. You called me.
I did, right. That's right. I just called to say I love you.
Oh, great. What kind?
What kind?
Yes. What kind of juice do you love?
I've just professed my heart and you're asking me about juice?
Yes, I care. And you seem to be really excited about it. In fact, you love it. I like pineapple juice. Can I pick some up for you? I would if you'd like.
That would be nice of you. I mean, I like pineapple juice too. Why are we talking about this?
About juice?
Yes.
I don't know. You tell me.
Tell you what? What were we talking about?
Juice, I think.
But why?
Because you said you love it.
I do.
Is this why you called to tell me you love juice?
No, while I am very fond of pineapple juice and other juices too, for that matter, I called to say that I love you.
Oh, that's great. I love you too.
How wonderful.
Yes.
Yes. Are we done talking? I think so.
Okay.
Sure.
Great.
Fantastic. Bye?
Yeah. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes, bye.
Okay, bye.
Take two.
I think it's dead. Do you copy?
What should we do, Charlie?
Podium, please. Come in, Charlie. I'm going to the podium. Affirmative.
Take three. Come in, Eric. This is Leora. Do you copy?
Loud and clear. Leora, I copy. Go ahead.
I just called to say I love you. Over.
It sounded like you said you love juice. Affirmative? Over.
Negative. I said I love you. Over.
Message received. I love you too. Over.
I do like juice, though. Over.
Me too. Pineapple juice. How do you feel about pineapple juice? Over.
That's a big affirmative. Over.
I'll grab some on my way home. Over.
See you then. Over.
10-4. Looking forward to it. Over and out.
I made an invitation to lunch one day. I was new to town and was looking forward to reaching out to this colleague. He served in another faith tradition, and we had crossed paths at different events, and I was just curious to meet this person and learn a little more and get to know them and just be curious about beginning our relationship together. And so I made an invitation. We met at this Mexican restaurant at a certain time on a certain day, and we greeted one another, exchanged pleasantries. We found a table and sat down, and he began to tell me about himself, which was fantastic. I was really curious about this person's backstory, how they arrived in town, and how they got interested in their religious tradition. And they were just beginning to unwind their entire story for me, where they came from, how they got involved in religious life, and their philosophy of life. And I really enjoyed it. And then the chips came, and we ate those, and they started telling me about where they used to live, and people they used to know, and movements they used to be involved in. And I thought that was interesting too. And by the time the chips came and went and our lunches were served, I realized that I had barely spoken a word the entire time so far. And so I tried to interject here or there or with something of the conversation, and it just kind of fell flat. The person was really, it seemed, uninterested in hearing from me. And then they carried forth and started teaching me all kinds of things that I suppose they assumed I didn't know. I don't know how they would have made this assumption, because they had not really heard much of anything from me yet at all. But yet they continued on and on and on, and my interest began to wane, especially the point in the conversation where they forced me to do a riddle right in the middle of lunch. So sure were they of their wisdom that they had to impart on me that they stopped all of, I would say, our conversation, but really it was their monologue, to ask me a riddle and then wait for me to get the answer. Now, riddles are funny things because there's the question and then a clever answer of some point. And in religious life, riddles can be used to make, philosophical and religious spiritual points. Well, I didn't get his answer right away. He really drew it out. 15 minutes during the middle of lunch, this person waited for me to get the answer to the riddle. It was painful, very painful. It continued like this through the whole lunch. Until the end, I could not wait to get out of there. As we were leaving lunch that day, we were going out the front doors, and I kid you not, the person said, "Oh, dear, I think I might have talked a lot during lunch today. Next time we have lunch, we'll have to make sure to have a more balanced conversation where I can hear some from you." Next time we have lunch. Right. We haven't had lunch since. It was a strange thing to be in a space where I just wasn't listened to. I'm aware as a white male that might be a unique experience for me, that others might come by much more readily. But I was just completely disregarded and ignored during our time together. They seemed to have no interest, and I just wasn't listened to at all. Listening. It's so important. So I'm now going to talk for a bit about listening, which seems slightly hypocritical, but we're just going to move on. We all know what it feels like to be listened to, how affirming and nourishing it can be, the space it can open up for us, the way it allows us to be ourselves, to say what we have to say, to explore new ideas, and really just to be ourselves in the world. It's a sacred and precious thing to be listened to. It's a foundational thing. In fact, in, I would say, near any classroom in the country, at least grade school, one of the first things a teacher will do is figure out a mechanism to get the class's attention so that they will listen, so that they can begin to share. I asked my kids this morning, hey, kids, what do your teachers do when they would like you to listen? Without falter, one of my kids goes, and the kids would listen. The other one said, oh, well, one of my teachers just raises their hand. Ah, that's a classic move. The teacher raises their hand and waits until everyone else sees and stops talking and raises their hand too. Slowly, in a chain reaction, people realize that the room is getting a little quieter, and then everyone is quiet, raising their hand, and then the teacher can commence. Because the teacher has very little interest in sharing unless they know they're going to be listened to. At the beginning of this year, I started a spiritual direction program with the Urban Center Spirituality Center in Portland, Oregon. It's a year-long program of study and practicum and classes to understand the practice of spiritual direction, which is really the art of holding space and listening. I found this program incredibly valuable. These folks from all walks of life have gathered to get together to learn from listeners, people who understand this beauty and this art of holding space for another person to see what comes alive when that person can share and be listened to. Indeed, as we gathered that first class back in September, we talked about what spiritual direction meant, what it means to do that. Am I frozen? Oh. All right. I have no idea where I left off, but I did notice that I got caught with one of those fantastic silly faces when you go frozen. So I'm glad at least you got a silly face out of it while I got frozen. But I don't know where I left. Charlie, we put it in the chat, a general area of where I was when I stopped. The end. Okay, that's nice, Charlie. Thanks a lot for that. Just wrap it up. Is that what you're saying? No, I'm kidding. Waiting for Charlie here to give me a cue. We heard everything. Oh, all right. All right, great. Well, So spiritual direction is what I'm assuming I was talking about. So the spiritual direction class, we got together on the first day, and we just talked about what spiritual direction means and holding space for folks to begin to understand the deep sacred value of that. That was the first class. The second class was definitely and clearly about listening, understanding that when you companion people and when you're engaging the spiritual journey, that listening is an instrumental and such an important part of that. Henry Nouwen wrote a lot about spiritual direction and discernment, and he wrote that the beauty of listening is that those who are listened to start feeling accepted, start taking their words more seriously, and discovering their own true selves. Listening is a form of spiritual hospitality by which you invite strangers to become friends, to get to know their inner selves more fully, and even to dare to be silent with you. I have a lot of wonderful Unitarian Universalist ministerial colleagues, and each of us ministers in our own unique way. Some bold and prophetic, preaching from the mountaintops, some quiet and pastoral. I find myself in a quieter ministry than some of my colleagues. I tend to listen a lot. I don't listen more than I talk because I don't feel like I have something important to say, because I hope that I do have important things to say every once in a while at least. But I listen more than I talk because I believe other people also have very important things to say as well. We know this process in our church as we offer a program called Soul Matters each year. There are small groups where people get together and they listen and they share to one another. And it's in a structured form where you might go around and every single person has a chance to share what's on their heart for, say, 4 to 5 minutes each. And every other person in the circle holds that space and listens to them. Just listens. Doesn't try and fix or affirm or yes, 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 that me too. Doesn't wait to say what they're going to say next, but just listens. And what's interesting when we invite people into this process for the first time is how very foreign it feels to simply be the one sharing, uninterrupted, and to find what comes out and what you explore through the process of simply sharing and being listened to. But even more so, perhaps, are those people who are listening, those people who stop thinking about the responses and just truly listen to that other person, wondering, being curious, and receiving the gift of that other person's shared experience. Carl Minzer once said that listening is a magnetic and strange thing, a creative force, listening. Listening is a creative force. The friends who listen to us are the ones that we move toward. When we are listened to, it creates us, makes us unfold and expand. In that supple and ripe space that is being listened to, we are created and we are invited to unfold and expand. Now, we could go overboard if everyone just chose to listen to each other. That wouldn't work. If you sat in a room with 2 people listening to each other, listening to them, well, basically you have 3 people just sitting in a quiet room. So sharing is important as well. The quality of sharing is important as well. Brave sharing, like we heard in the song from Sarah Bareilles. Empathetic sharing. Sharing that doesn't get too lost in the ego or only thinking about oneself, but also considers that they are listeners listening too, thinking about their experience. When we share something, that is us. That is us in the world. It is in what we share that we see who we are. Each of us so unique, each of us important because we have a different perspective to share. Think back to a time that you were listening and sharing, learning, and offering. One of the places in my life that I know that listening has offered me perhaps more than sharing is around racial awareness. There was a time earlier in my life, and still now, of course, that I knew much, much less around ideas of systemic oppression and white supremacy and my own identity as being a white person. And it is through listening, more than sharing, that I was able to learn, by listening to those lived experiences of other people. So again, we see the back and forth of the listening and the sharing. And we need both, and we need each other to do this work. Mark Morrison Reed, the Unitarian Universalist minister, writes that the central task of religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others, and once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. And it is through listening and sharing that we are able to unveil those bonds that bind each to all, to find that connectedness and relationship, to find those particulars of our lives in the lives of those around us. And hopefully that inspires us to act for justice. When James Luther Adams and Leslie Pemberton were at that Unitarian church in Chicago in 1948, they gathered everyone together to listen and to share. And indeed, that one person's heart was opened as he listened and others shared. But he also shared as well. And I wonder how James Luther Adams' heart was changed by listening to someone that he didn't agree with. Both are important. Each one of us, in every scenario we encounter, can be both student and teacher as we listen and share. We arrive humbly as a student, wondering and curious what this person or experience might have to offer us. And then, with perhaps some gentleness, know that we have something to offer as well. We create our best lives when we listen and we share well. In fact, we create our best congregational life when we listen and share well. And that's the exact reason that we are doing these listening sessions that Marion told us about earlier in our service. In this scenario, the congregation becomes the one who is listened to. And remember, when someone is listened to, they unfold and they expand. It's a creative space. And so through this process, we'll gather together in the same way they did with that board of trustees in that first Unitarian church, in that classic style of being together and being curious with one another and wondering about how our values might take us into the future. We'll become through our listening and sharing. And so I really do invite everyone into that process. The process of listening and sharing is going to be equally as valuable for us as the product that we find at the end, our hopes and dreams and goals of what might guide us forward into the future. And we've chosen this process that comes from a wonderful Unitarian Universalist named Laura Parks, a process called the nested bowls process. And it looks to our values and wonders about who we are now, who we want to be, and we ask ourselves big questions so we might dream big as well. And this structure is important because, as the walkie-talkies taught us, structure can be a good thing. It can be clear. It can allow us to have a container that can guide our conversations. Marge Piercy writes of this kind of sharing together and what it might offer us. In her poem Counsels, she writes that we must sit down together and reason together. We must sit down. Men standing want to hold forth. They rain down upon faces lifted. We must sit on the floor, on the earth, on stones and mats and blankets. And there must be no front to the speaking, no platform, no stage, no table. We will not crane to see who's speaking. Perhaps we should sit in the dark. In the dark, we could utter our feelings. In the dark, we could propose and describe and suggest. In the dark, we could not see who speaks, but only the words. And the words would say what they say, thus saying what we feel and what we want, what we fear for ourselves and each other. In the dark, perhaps we could begin to listen. Perhaps we should talk in groups, small enough for everyone to speak. Perhaps we should start by speaking softly. The women must learn to dare to speak. The men must bother to listen. The women must learn to say, I think this is so. And the men must learn to stop dancing solos on the ceiling. After each speaks, she or he will repeat a ritual phrase. It is not I who speaks, but the wind. Wind blows through me. Long after me is the wind. I love this poem because it invites us into truly a humble and gracious way of being together and sharing. I don't know that we have to turn off the lights and do our listening sessions in the dark. I trust that we can hold that space in community and covenant together. But approaching it with this kind of humility and graciousness will serve us well. And listening and sharing is nothing new to us as a congregation. Indeed, it is how we live out our congregational life, and our joys and sorrows on Sunday mornings, and our pastoral care team reaching out to those who could have some companionship, and our meetings of church programs and ministries, even in emails, social events, kayaking and hiking is an interchange of sharing and listening the entire time. At our justice events, whether in town at a rally, listening and sharing, or gathering at the church to write cards in support of our healthcare workers. And even in this worship space, which at one moment might feel one-sided, like I'm just sharing and you're just listening. But in truth, when people ask me where service ideas comes from, I say that I listen to three things. I listen to what's going on in the world around us. I listen to what's happening in the congregation. And I listen to what's happening in my own heart. And where these three things come together is where our services come from. And then every week, then, after we share, everyone who created the service continues to listen again, to see and respond to how what was shared was received, so that we might continue to grow and continue the conversation. This process, offering and receiving, it's the same process of our human connections, of our community, and in fact, it's at the heart of our own spiritual experience. This tug between listening to the inner voice and then sharing what we are in the world. Parker Palmer writes, before I can tell my life what I want to do with it, I must listen to my life telling me who I am. Each of us in our own way. Listening to that voice inside, to our conscience. We must listen. Brother Steindl-Rath from the Christian tradition writes about how he listens. He says that in his tradition, they're invited to listen to God. And in that moment, they say, today, when you hear God's voice, harden not your heart. And they say this every moment, today, now and now and now again, because the God is always speaking to them. Now translate as you will. But the universe, the voice inside, your conscience, always speaking. So let us harden not our hearts. Because Brother Steindl-Rath would say, God is simple. God has one thing to say. I love you. And God says this over and over and over in a multitude of ways, through songs and poems, through trees and breeze and strawberries. And so he would say, we must learn to speak strawberry language so that we can receive this from God and listen to the strawberries. Listening to strawberries, to hear God say, I love you. I like that. This listening, this sharing, this is work we do within ourselves. We do it amongst each other as a community. And then we do it beyond these walls in Central Oregon. How we listen and how we share creates who we are as individuals, as a Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Central Oregon. May we listen and share with care, and with empathy, and with love. And if we listen and share with those, so might the world then unfold and expand with care and empathy and love. May it be so.